All right, friends, welcome. It is week one, lecture two. So it's our second lecture of this cohort of this week, two of four. So after this, we are already halfway done, if you can believe that. That's insane. Pretty crazy, in my opinion. This stuff always goes by so fast, and especially when you're learning stuff, it makes things go by much, much quicker. A couple of different things we have, some housekeeping, and usually I like to start all of my lectures with this, with housekeeping. It's just, again, another reminder of what is expected from you. Discussion questions are due and they're already open, so please make sure, do not let this be the thing that prevents you from moving forward. Go here, knock them out. You can do actually both weeks. I don't tell anybody, but I opened up both weeks so that way you can just knock it out and not have to worry about it. So that is available and ready for you. Secondly, we've got core assignments due. You can see all of your core assignments here. You can also go to this assignment checklist, and this tells you all of your core assignments. There's a few things with that that are really, 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 really important. So let's kind of dive into that. But there's a reminder, they are due by Sunday. Both of these are due by 11:59 p.m. Sunday, but there's kind of a caveat with this core assignments. And that is because, if you can already believe it, don't stress out, but our belt exam actually opens up tomorrow. So you guys are already available to take a belt exam. And it is not scary. It's not like something you have to study for, so don't stress about that. It is just it's just a reminder, or it's a kind of everything that we've been doing, and what we're going to do today, redoing that. It's very similar to the Algo app. It actually looks identical to the Algo app. So if you're comfortable with the Algo app, then you're going to be just fine. If you've never touched the Algo app, I would encourage you, absolutely, you need to go do that, because it is just like that. Plus, you have to have core assignments due for that. So what do I mean by these are due Sunday, but also we need to go ahead and there's a little bit of a caveat. Your belt exam opens up tomorrow. What we're going to do is I will go through, Trey and I will go through, and we will see how many people have completed 6 out of 7 core assignments. So all of these, this assignment Discord, which I've seen a lot of you guys do, so thanks for doing that. Creating variables, Algo app level 1, predict arrays, get on that ride, Algo app levels 4 and 5, and app 7. As long as you've done 6 out of 7 of those, you qualify for a belt exam. And we're going to check a couple times throughout the day. So, if you're like, hey, I'm not going to get it done until a little bit later, that's okay. TAs also on the weekend will be able to give you a belt exam code. And so if you can't get it done until, like 7 p.m. tomorrow, and I'm definitely off, I don't work past 5, especially on Fridays, and I won't work on the weekends, then you can reach out to TA and they can go in and see and make sure that, hey, you have completed 6 out of 7. That is a requirement for you to get a belt exam code. One thing I really, 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 really want to point out is that everything is due next Thursday. That is all of your assignments, all of your discussions. So discussions are closed. This first week, they close on Sunday anyway, so those are due. But your remaining assignments, and remember, you have to have 90% of assignments in order to move forward, which is 6 out of 7. If it's 6 out of 7 isn't exactly 90%, then we just say at least 1, right? That's the closest. And then you have to have a passing exam. So you might ask yourself, well, how does the exam work? I'm going to send you an email with all of that information. But I talk about the exam, I talk about how to do it, where to go, what to do. But simply what you're going to do is you're going to go to our class. And this is on the accelerator, but the Flex looks exactly the same. You're going to go to your platform. And then what you'll do is you will have something right here. So this is what your platform will look like. Mine usually just looks a little bit different, but this is what your platform looks like. You're going to go to this take exams, and it's going to take you here. In my email I send you, you will get a belt exam code. It's going to be some random string of digits and letters. And then once you input that, you are starting your exam. Now, you've got 24 hours to take your exam. The exam is going to be 10 questions. And again, it emulates the Algo app. So if you can do the Algo app, it looks just like that. It's going to be 10 questions, and you can take it within that 24 hours as many times as you want. You have to get, in order to pass, you have to get an 8 out of 10. So let's say the first time you take it, you only get 1. Okay, you can take it again. You can take it up to 100 times or up to infinity, however many times it takes you within that hour. So so within that hour, you can take it as many times as you need to in order to get an 8 out of 10. Then once you get an 8 out of 10, all you have to do, and again, all of this material is going to be there for you, and so I'll write all this out, is you'll just take a screenshot of your 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 that you have. You'll take a screenshot of that, and then you'll see whenever you finish your exam, it'll have a little spot to upload your exam. And so you'll just upload that screenshot right there. What then happens is on our end, we have our ops team that'll go in and they'll verify, they'll see your screenshot, they'll go into your account and they can verify that that is true. So if any of you guys are wizards with Photoshop, unfortunately, we do have the numbers on the back end, so it won't do anything for you. So they'll verify and then tell me, cool, yes, they passed. And then you're good to go, right? You've passed your exam. So it's as many times as you need within 24 hours. Once that 24 hours is up, let's say you still only get a 7 out of 10, don't fret. You get 3 total chances. So 3 total 24-hour timeframes. So let's say the first 24 hours is up. You've taken it 5 times. You can only get up to a 7 out of 10. You need an 8 out of 10 in order to move forward. Well, then you just request another code. So you can message myself, you can message Trey, or you can message a TA. And then what they can do is they can give another code. And then once you input that code, you get an additional 24 hours, right? So you can keep going as many times as you need. Within that 24 hours, you have 3 of those, 3 24-hour windows. Now, the last time to do it, or the last time to submit is Thursday, right? So do you have to take it tomorrow? No. Do you have to take it this weekend? No, you don't. I would wildly encourage you, just so you don't get overwhelmed and things happen in the week. But the last day to turn one in is Thursday. So that means, let's say that you definitely don't do this, but let's say you didn't use any of your 3 and you waited until 5 p.m. on Thursday, right? Just to do your first one. Well, you would not then have, 3 24-hour periods. You have up to 3 24-hour periods, but everything must be turned in by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday. So if you wait till 5 p.m. to start your first 24-hour block, that's all you're getting. You're not getting a full 24 hours. You're getting from 5 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. That's the cutoff. So even if you started at 11:58 p.m., you got 1 minute and then you have to turn it in. So please plan for that. I would very much so encourage you, work this weekend to do that. You definitely need to do that. Do it this weekend, and then that way, if you need, you need some TA help over the weekend, or you need some help with myself or Trey or some TA help in the week, and then maybe, okay, Monday you get some help, you feel better, and you go on to Tuesday or Wednesday and you take it again and you pass it with flying colors, then you're good to go, no stress. But everything is due Thursday at 11:59 p.m. PST. Yes, Nicole, or PDT. I don't know exactly. I think we're PDT right now, but Pacific time, right? Doesn't matter. 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. Are there any questions with that? Feel free to raise your hand, or feel free to, are there any questions here? Okay. I'm going to give you a little insider secret that I don't know that I'm allowed to give you, but alas, here we are. The exam is going to be 10 questions. 7 of them are going to be very similar to the Algo app. 3 of them are going to have functions on there. We're not talking about functions until next Tuesday. So what do you do? Well, you can still work forward and learn functions, right? The material is still available for you. You can still work forward and you can do that. but you're gonna have to like finish a function. And so that's what those three are gonna be. The other thing to do is if you do wanna just knock this out this weekend, which again, I highly encourage you, remember you have access to all of the lectures. So here in this section in our lectures, we're in week 2, you have access to this right now. You can actually watch Jonathan or Kyle's, or I think, yeah, Jonathan or Kyle's or Aaron's or any of these on functions. And so that stuff, you can still work ahead that way, right? So again, I acknowledge there's 3 ones that talk about returns and functions. We haven't talked about that yet. That's on Tuesday. I have advocated for us to switch it up because it feels confusing to myself as well. If you're confused, I feel you, but unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. So if you do need help with functions, you have the material and you have some lectures on functions already, please go use those. Jonathan, Kyle, Aaron, everybody here is a very, very incredible instructor. So please go and make sure that you kind of have that. So, okay, are there any questions regarding functions and all of that?
Like actual questions about the functions, or
No, sorry about the
Okay.
exam. About the exam.
Okay.
Any questions at all? Okay. Can you guys do me a favor? I usually like to check in. A scale out of 1 to 10. Can you guys just put how you're feeling so far about the material, about the pace of the program, just kind of how are you feeling about coding? Are you liking it? Is it new? Which it can be new and a little bit stressful, but as long as nobody, okay, good. 8s, 9s, 7s, that's awesome. 10s, love that. As long as nobody was like a 1, like I hate this, that's tough. It's like, oh, let's talk. It is new, right? It's all new material. This is new stuff, and sometimes new stuff can make you feel uncomfortable. So if you are feeling that, that's very normal, but great job at continuing to put your kind of nose to the grindstone and continuing to work hard on this material. So really excited for that. And I'm glad that you guys are all feeling good. And I always like to just get a pulse of my class, check in, see how you guys are doing. Cool. If you guys are in like the 2s and 3s, then that would probably be an indicator that I, as an instructor, am not doing well. Okay. Last little thing before we get into what we're actually going to learn today is yesterday we had a really awesome office hour, in my opinion. We walked through some homework. Some of the homework was like get on that ride, and we did some stretch stuff. We had some great people who helped out. James and Daniel crushed it. There were other ones as well. People were brave and shared their code and walked through and asked questions. It was awesome. And if you want to watch any of that, those are recorded. So we talked about, here's our homework walkthrough. I just called it homework walkthrough. There's some weird pauses in between, but we talk about some conditionals, which is what we're talking about today. If else statements, things like that. The other thing we did is I did have about 15, 20 minutes of talking about array methods. So with arrays, please go watch this. With arrays, we can do certain things because it's type with data types. We have abilities to have certain things. You can sort of think about it like, trying to think of a metaphor, like a Pokemon, right? Certain Pokemon can do certain things. Even down, you get to like a fire type can do fire stuff, and a water type can do water stuff, right? Same sort of thing with our data types. Remember, if we do numbers, well, we can do some arithmetic with numbers. Can't do arithmetic with strings, right? It doesn't really make sense. We can concatenate them, sure, but I can't divide C by D. It doesn't do anything for me. With arrays, we have some methods or functionality that we can also utilize. Those being like array.length, .pop, and .push. Those are your big 3. And I believe those are going to be on the exam. So please make sure that you do at least watch this. Again, I think it's like 15 minutes. Okay, it's 20 minutes. So I lied. But we do talk about that. And we also talk about a string concatenation. It's called template literals that we're going to talk about today too. So it's a good little just 20-minute blurb of, hey, here's us expanding on what we learned on Tuesday. Okay, great. Okay, that's all I've got for housekeeping. Usually housekeeping is not going to be that long, but when you're talking about the Delta exam, I just want to make sure that there is no issues there. Okay. Now, what we're going into, and here's what we have today, is we're going to talk about conditionals and operators for the next 45 minutes. probably take about a 10-minute break. Maybe I'll talk in the next 40 minutes, do about a 10-minute break. We'll see where we get. And then we're going to talk about loops, for loops, T diagrams. If we get to it, we're going to do nested for loops and conditionals. But really just your loop construction and your T diagrams is going to be what's really important. So with that being said, let's jump into our material. So we're going to be talking about conditionals. So let's get to our actual material. Obviously, I'm not going to just read it. You guys know that. But that's something, there's just quite a bit of stuff that we can look at here. So here in conditionals, you might ask yourself, well, what is a conditional? What makes a conditional? Why do we have it? Well, really conditional is just some logical assertions that we can make of our code, right? So it's really telling our code, hey, if this happens, then go ahead and do this. If you look at the get on that ride assignment, basically saying like, hey, if they are 48 inches tall or more, then go ahead, they can get on that ride. If they're not, right, then they can't ride it. So it's a way that we can create these assertions. We can create these different logic branches, if you will, or blocks that allow our code to decipher, okay, if I have certain conditions or unique conditions, then my code can do different things. Okay, so here we're looking at it. There's three main things when you're dealing with a conditional statement. We have the if, the else if, and the else. So in the same way that when we declare a variable, we say let. Let is a keyword, right? Or const or var, right? When we show that there's a bracket, or saying like let sum array equal bracket and then something inside of there, that bracket tells our JavaScript, hey, there is an array coming here, right? And so it knows what kind of data type it can interpret and infer what kind of data type that is. If, else if, and else are other keywords of JavaScript that allow JavaScript to say, okay, I am reading this if, this keyword, now I've got some conditions or some logic that I need to be aware of. And we call these conditional statements. So the way it works, and I'm just gonna build it out here, is I'm gonna say let x equal 7. Actually, let's do this. Let's do let age equal 27. Perfect. Cool. Let's say that I work at a adult milk bar, i.e. I work at a bar, right? And if you guys have ever worked at a bar, or not worked at a bar, but been to a bar, oftentimes you have to get your ID checked. And depending on if you're young, it makes you feel cool and or like, oh no, I'm getting my ID checked. But if you're a little bit older, if you're getting in your 30s, 40s, and they ask for your ID, you're like, hey, all right, I still got it, right? I'm still looking young. And so if we take that scenario, right, we're thinking, okay, what is the bouncer looking for? What is the person at the door looking for? They're saying, okay, I'm gonna look at a birthday. And if that birthday meets my condition, i.e. being 21 or older, then I'm going to let them into the bar. If it doesn't, then I want to tell them, sorry, you're way too young, or you can't come here because it's illegal and I'll lose my job. So let's take that logic, let's write it out in code. What we can do is we have this variable of age, right? What I can say is if, and now I have to put my condition, right? So I tell JavaScript, all right, we have this if, and then JavaScript's gonna look for what we call a condition, basically determining or what's gonna determine this unique case. Here, what I'm wanting to say is if the age of my person is greater than 21. So what I can do is I can say age is greater than 21. Perfect. Now, one thing to note, we do have different operators. We've got, are gonna have like greater than, less than. Let me put a comma between these for you guys. Greater than, less than. We have equal to. Now, one thing to note is whenever we're dealing with JavaScript, we have a double equal sign, and then there's another one that we'll talk about in a little bit. We have greater than or equal to. And we've got less than or equal to. Oops. Sorry. Cool. made it a little bit bigger for you guys. Hopefully that's easier to read. So we have less than or equal to. There is a third one in JavaScript. That's a triple equal sign. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But what we're saying is, all right, I'm starting my conditional statement. I'm putting in my condition. And this condition, our computer is going to render or actually do this, right? It's going to do this mathematical operation, and it's going to take age, and it's going to decipher if 27 is greater than 21. And as we all hopefully know, 27 is greater than 21. And so it's going to give us one of our primitive data types back. Does anybody know? Can anybody think what primitive data type? There's 3 of them. Anybody feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. What primitive
Boolean.
data? Yeah, it's a Boolean, right? It's going to tell us it's either going to be true or false. And so if you remember when we talked about Booleans, I said, hey, these are going to come in handy because they are a huge thing when it comes, and the main thing when it comes to conditionals. So what happens is JavaScript does this, and it renders a Boolean of either true or false. If that is true, then it enters into this code bracket, right? And the way that we decipher that is through 2 brackets. And so here I'm just gonna, let's say I just want to console log, welcome to dbar. Cool. So what I'm saying is, all right, if age, it does this, it renders it's true because 27 is greater than 21. If it's true, then it sees this bracket, it enters in, does everything until it gets to this closing bracket. So in this case, it would say console log, welcome to the bar. Now, there's a second one that we can do, and it's called else. Now, else is sort of a catch-all. Else is one that you don't have to put a condition because you always put this at the end, right? And it's just any other instance. In this case, it's a little bit binary, right? Either the person is older than 21 or they are, it's either greater than 21 or less than 21. And we'll see, I guess we can make it a little bit unique if we wanted. But in this case, either they're greater than 21 or not, right? And if they're not, then we're going to console log. Sorry, kiddo, maybe in the future. So here is my conditional chain, right? It's called a chain when we start with if, and then any other sort of conditions along with this if is called a conditional chain. And so right now it either is greater than 21 or it says, sorry, kiddo, maybe in the future. Can anybody see an issue with this code? Anything that we might run into, a weird bug?
The semicolon.
Yeah, semicolon. But those will be inferred.
What if the value is 21? It's exactly the same.
There you go, Justin. Exactly, right? What if somebody is 21? Right? Right now, what this is going to do is it's going to say is age greater than 21. Well, right now 27 is, but is 21 greater than 21?
No.
No, right? 21 is 21. And so I see that Miguel already put that. We could do something like this that says greater than or equal to 21. That would work exactly perfect. For the sake of showing you the other way we could do it, I'm going to show you in a different way. But Miguel, you're exactly right. I would do greater than or equal to. If I've got multiple conditions, let's say that if they are 21, then I want to say, hey, happy birthday year or something like that, right? Well, that's where I can do something like an else if, and that allows me to do multiple conditions, right? And I can have as many else ifs as I want. So maybe I say if age is 21. So if it is 21, then I want to console.log. Happy birthday year. Woohoo. Cool. So now what our computer does is it has this value of age, and we can get this value, whether it's a variable or the user input some information. There's different ways we can get it. But once it gets here, it's going to say, okay, I've got this chain, and it's going to go to this, it's going to start at the top, and then it goes down one by one. So let's say this was 21. It's gonna say if age is greater than 21. Well, that's gonna return false, right? Because 21 is not greater than 21. It's equal to, but that doesn't matter, right? The only thing is true or false. So it says false. Once our computer within a condition gets a false, it skips all this code and goes on to the next condition. Right? So even if within this, I had it as all of this, right? Let's say that this was all a bunch of different lines of code, and let's say it was super long. If this is not true, then it just skips all this code and it goes straight to line 19. So even if this was a million lines, it would skip it and then go straight to 19. And each condition, the conditional is looking for a true, and then if it gets to an else, that means, hey, nothing was true, and so let's just go ahead and do this. So then what it does is else if age equals 21. Okay, cool, that is true, because the age is 20. Let me get rid of some of these. The age is 21, right? I broke it. There we go. Age is 21, and so then it'll say happy birthday year, woohoo. Else, let's say that I was 19. What this does is it goes, okay, is this true? Is 19 greater than 21? Nope. Okay, skip to the next one. Is 19 equal to 21? Nope. Skip to the next one. Oh, the next one's an else. Cool, that's kind of my sweeper, my just takes up the rest. If it gets to this else, then it just go ahead and enters an else because there is no condition. And then it will console log, sorry kiddo, maybe in the future. Cool. I see a hand raised. Go ahead, Graylin.
Hey, I saw initially you dropped a space down and then put the else F in the middle. Is that the pattern that we're supposed to go to? Like if, else if, then else?
Yeah. So great question. If you were to take it this way, you get an error. Oops. If you were to do something like this, you see you get an error. A condition always starts with an if. You can just have it as an empty if. So you can just do something like this, right? You do something like this. I can just have an if. I don't have to have an else that closes it. I don't have to have an else if. If this works, cool. And then if not, it'll skip to the next line of code. That's the only one that you can have alone by itself is an if statement. You can then pair it with an if else, right? So if and then an else, that's fine. Or if you have multiple conditions or multiple things you want to do, you add in an else if, but it does have to be in this order. You start with an if always. Then if you have multiple conditions, you get to the else if. And then lastly, that means, you know what? If none of my conditions match, here's just what I want you to do. Go ahead and do an else. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I see another hand raised. Justin, go ahead.
Why is there, when you put console log, why doesn't it start right after the bracket? Why is it on the next space or the next line?
Here.
Yeah, so like when you do the,
Set it right
you
there.
have the parentheses and then the open bracket, why don't you start console log right there?
Yeah, so great question. This is for readability's sake. If I had it and it looked like this, is what you're asking, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I could do that. If you have lots of conditions, it gets a little bit jumbled. This will still work. I want to point this out. This still works, right? JavaScript reads it the same way. From a readability, we want to make sure other people can read our code well. This kind of makes it a little bit easier, at least for me, makes it a little bit easier. I've also seen people do it like this, just to really differentiate that, okay, this is the code block that is associated with this if else. Because if you're looking at hundreds of lines of code or thousands of lines of code, it can get a little bit confusing compared to having it like this. This is just, again, reading preference. It'll still work if you do it the other way. Most developers, this is the way that they follow. But again, you could do it this way or that way. But again, functionally, it works the same if I do it any other way. But great question.
and we still need to close it with a semicolon and the bracket too, right?
So the bracket's the most important. Again, the semicolon is interpreted with JavaScript. It's good practice. As you see, I often don't do it. JavaScript will interpret that. The bracket itself is important. right? Because what happens is we have this conditional kind of statement, then we have our actual condition. And then if that condition is true, our computer then looks for the brackets, the open and close, and it runs that code, right? So this opens up, okay, if this is true, here's the beginning of what I want you to do. Let's see, at a million lines of code, and then you get to this part, it's like, okay, that's the end of what I want you to do. So that open and close brackets are wildly important. Any other questions on kind of the beginning of this? And we're going to take it up to another level. Just put a 1 in the chat if this is making so much sense, or put a 0 if you are super lost.
Hey, real quick, just for looking clean. Sorry, I don't have my camera on because I've been sick for the past
No,
like
you're good, Tyler. No worries.
the bracket. Are you able to put the bracket like right behind console log and like right at the end of like Wahoo, just for an example? Like would that still look clean?
You mean like right here?
Yeah,
If I did it
right
like
there,
this.
that still work? no?
You can, I would say that you would still, so you want to make sure that's on the outside of your parenthesis. Right, so you could do that. If that makes a lot of sense to you, I'd say right now, that's fine. Whatever makes the most sense. Again, this programmatically would work the exact same way.
Okay.
Yeah, so I personally think that this makes the most sense for me and how I read code. Again, I've also seen it this way. Both of them work. Both of them are a-okay for you. And again, programmatically, they work the exact same. Great question though, Tyler. Any other questions on this? Okay. Now, the other thing I want to point out is, let's say that I had a bunch of these else ifs, right? Let's actually, there's this really popular, I'm gonna comment all this out. And the way you comment out, if I'm ever doing something quickly, feel free to put this in, put it in chat, be like, how did you do that? But I'll try to, as I do, it's like little hotkeys, just something I always use. If you comment, either you highlight, if you have a bunch of it, you highlight it. Or if you have one line, you can then put on Mac, it is the command button, and then the question mark or the slash, and that'll comment something, that'll comment a whole line. So you don't actually have to put the 2 slashes. Or again, if you highlight everything and you comment, that comments out everything. We haven't talked about a comment, so I guess I'll talk about that real fast. Comment varies with each language, right? So it can be JavaScript or HTML or Python. They all have their own different types of comments and how that works. What it does is, in JavaScript, is 2 slashes. And really what that does is that just says, hey, don't read this code. And so when JavaScript's going and reading from top to bottom, if it sees these 2 slashes, it just skips it until it has something that's not slashed out. That's all a comment is. So you can write like, oh, here's what I want to do. Or if you don't want it to be read, you just say something like that, and then you're good to go. Cool. But yeah, so it's command question marks or slash, and then for Windows, I believe it's central slash or question mark. If you're a Windows person, you can confirm for me. That'd be awesome. Or maybe it's the Windows. I don't know. It's one of the two. I'm not a Windows person, so sorry about that. Okay. Real quickly, I want to talk about one called foobar, which is a great example. Let's say that we want to see if a number is divisible by 3, 5, or both 3 and 5. This is a very, very, very popular algorithmic question. And so if divisible by 3, I'm going to put console.log foo. You'll see foobar a lot. I honestly don't know why. So if we have it by 5, then say bar, and then we'll just do this. And if it's by both, I want you to console log foobar. This is a really popular one. It used to be a popular whiteboarding question, It's pretty simple, so it's maybe a little bit too easy and it got popular for that. So, okay. So here's our thing we want to do, right? We want to write something that can take in a number, right? We're just going to make up a number. So we're going to say let number or num equal, let's say 15. Cool. A num equal 15. I want to write a conditional statement that can check to see if something is divisible by 3, divisible by 5, or if it's divisible by both 3 and 5. In order for me to do that, I've got to teach you something called a modulus. I think that's how you spell it. It's either that or OLOS. I think it's you. Okay. Now, what that is the percent sign. Does anybody know what this is before I explain it? Anybody already have some experience with this?
It gives you the remainder. So it's-
Exactly, Jared.
If you divide 3 by 2, it divides in once and then it has a remainder of 1.
Yeah,
as an
exactly. Exactly. So if I were to console.log 2 modulo 3. Actually, yeah, let's do 3 modulo 2. Let's see what it gives me. I'm going to see this, and I get 1. Now, what this is doing is this modulus, this percent sign, is taking this number on the right, and it's saying, okay, you're going into this number in the left, and what is the remainder, right? So I can make 2 go into 3 one time for 2, and then there's a remainder of 1, right? Because 2, and then the difference between 2 and 3 is 1. Cool. Let's maybe make it a little bit different. Let's say 6 and 8. Now, if I run this, it's going to give me 2, right? 6 goes into 8 one time for 6, and the remainder is 2 because 8 minus 6 is 2. Any questions? If I do this, let's say 7 and 11, what do you guys think is gonna console log here?
Or
Yeah, I see lots of 4s. Yeah, exactly, 4, right? 7 goes into 11 one time. There's a remainder of 4, so it will give me 4. So that is our modulus. Perfect. That's something that is going to be really, really helpful, especially when you get into odds and evens, because one little trick is if you do anything modulus 2, it's either going to give you a 0 or a 1. So in this case, 11 is odd. 11 is odd, so it's going to give you a 1. If I were to do 10, it's going to give you a 0. So a nice little fact, if you're ever looking at odds and evens, you can always modulus 2 and then create some conditions. Say, hey, if the remainder is 1 or if it gives me 1, well, then I know that that's odd, right? Because 2, anything modulus 2, if it gives me 1, well, that's odd. And if it's 0, that's even. Okay. So now that we know that, let's run and build this out. I think that's all I had to do anyway. Let's see. Yep, Justin, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm confused of why you put 2 into 10 and it's not 5, because it goes into 10 5 times.
So it goes into 10 5 times, but remember, it just gives you the remainder. It doesn't say how many times does it go in. It goes in 5 times, but let me go back. It's modulus just gives you the remainder, not how many times it goes in. If I was to do that, that would just be like a divisible. So if I were to say like 10 over 2, then we would get 5, right? But this is just giving me the remainder. It goes in
So then
5
how come it
times,
wouldn't
but-
it be 8 then? Because wouldn't 8 be the remainder?
No, 'cause-
it's, sorry, it's
No, yeah.
looking at whatever's left over. So you can work that math problem all the way through, but you'll have 1 left over if it's 11 divided by 2. So you'll go into it 5 times, but you have that 1 left over. If there's nothing left over, that means there's nothing left over. So 0 or whatever's left over is what it's looking for. It doesn't care about how many times it goes in or anything like that. It's just looking for the remainder number of
Mhm.
what it.
So
Does
that's
it
why
go
when you
in-
do into an even number, there's no remainder,
Mhm.
so that's why it's a 0.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I were to do
Alright.
this, it'll give me 0, right? Because it's just an even number. It's all just looking at the remainder. It's not how many times it goes in, but it's just, is there a remainder? Does that make a little bit more sense? Cool. Go ahead, James.
I may be skipping ahead a little bit, but okay, so I know there's a module and then there's also a remainder command. Is that correct? REM?
I think, yeah, but you just need to just worry about this guy right here.
Okay, is that the more popular in JavaScript? Because from what I understand, if you have two different signs in there, it depends on which one you use, that it copies the sign like a -10 or a -2. I just needed some clarification for that section.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk after this.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk on a different side because I don't want to confuse people as well, but happy to talk through that.
Okay.
Graylin, go ahead.
I was just curious, what was the purpose of writing that foobar statement at the top? Is that just
Oh, this right
knowledge,
here?
or does that have anything to do with the modulus that we're doing?
Yeah, so I had to teach you modulus in order for us to do this. Because if we're
Oh,
doing
okay.
divisible by 3, right? In order for us to see if something's divisible by 3, a way we could do that is say, is there a remainder when 3 goes into it? So yeah, so we're going to talk about that right now. So let's go build this out. Let's say our number is 15, right? Well, I have 3 things I can do. I can say if, and then I put my condition, and I say num modulus 3 equals 0. Can anybody tell me what this means? What does this mean? What is this condition kind of doing here? Go ahead, James.
It's just telling you that if there's nothing remaining
Mhm.
from, if it equals 0, it's going to be an even.
Not even
I mean, nothing remaining. Yeah.
means it's
Sorry.
divisible by 3, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so what this is doing is it's taking this and it's going to do this arithmetic. It's going to take my number and it's going to say, does 3 go in? Or it's going to give me the remainder of whatever my number is and how many times 3 goes into it, or whatever that remainder is. If it's 0, that means that 3 goes into it an even amount of times, right? 3 times 5 is 15. So right now, this is going to give me a 0 because there's no remainder. If this was 16, that'll give me 1, right? 17 is 2. And then once I get to 18, again, that's at 0 because 3 goes into 18 6 times, and then you're good. So here, what this is doing is it's saying, hey, this value, this is going to give me whatever. This equates to whatever that remainder is, just like we saw with console log, right? And it's going to take that value and compare it and say, does that equal 0? If it does, if that gives me true, then I want to console.log foo. Now I have another condition, right? I've got, what if I do, if I want to have a second condition, what do I type here? Do I do else, or what do I do?
Else if.
Else if, exactly. So else if, and then somebody want to lead me? What would I say here?
Console log.
Inside of here, I'm going to put console log.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Number modulus 5.
Yeah, num modulus 5. Yeah, Ben, exactly. Equals 0, right? I'm checking to see if this number is divisible by 5. And if it is, it's going to give me a 0. And then what do I want to do? I want to console.log bar. All right. Am I going to do an else here? Or am I going to do, what am I going to do? If I'm wanting to get this third one here, it's divisible by both.
Else if,
Else if, why is it an else if, Dalton?
because you're not done yet. Else
Yeah, I'm
is for whenever you're doing if everything else fails.
Sure, exactly. So yeah, if none of these conditions are met, then maybe I do an else. So exactly. So I'm gonna say else if. Now, I have both of these conditions, right? Num. I need to have both, so I can say num modulus 3, and this space doesn't matter. I just like it because for me it's visually better. 0. And if I want to have multiple conditions, I can do that. I don't have to have, just only one condition. I can have multiple using the and operator. Num modulus 5, 0. What this is doing, and then let's say console, and then we'll go through it. Console.log, foobar. With this, if I do a double and sign, that means and. That means both of these have to be true. It has to both be divisible by 3 and divisible by 5. If both conditions render true, then it enters into my code and then does that. Let's say that my number was 9. Let's just kind of skip through these first two for a second and we get to here. 9 modulo 3 is going to give me 0, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9. Good to go. 9 modulo 5, what is that going to give me?
Remainder.
A remainder of 4.
Remainder of 4, right? So this condition would not be true. If that's the case, if this was 9, this part would be true. This part would be false. And because I have the and here, that means that both of them have to be true. It would not enter and. This does not meet my qualifications. On the other hand, let's say I only cared if one of them were true. I could do or. And or is just these two pipes. They're located right above the enter button on your keyboard on the right side. Usually you have to like hold a shift because it's like a backslash, a shift, and then you do that. This is an or. Now, this is giving me an issue and I will talk about it here in a bit. But what this is saying is if this one is true, or if this one is true, then go ahead and enter into here. So again, if we were to say 10, well, again, skipping these, we get here 10 modulus 3 gives me a remainder of 1, right? Because 3 times 3 is 9, 10 minus 9 is 1. But 10 modulus 5 gives me 0, and because I have the or, all I needed was one true within my multiple conditions. And because of that, because I got one true, I can enter into here and console log foo bar. Okay, I see a couple different hands raised. I don't know who was first. So go ahead, whoever, I see Jared and somebody else.
Yeah, I just, 2 questions. Can you combine, like, let's say you wanted to check like 5 different things on that last else if, can you do num modulo 3, then the or num modulo 5, and then equals 0? Or do you have to do each one of those whole?
You'd have to do each one of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then can you do more than just 2? Like, could you now add or num? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so you could do multiple, they would just have to be the same. So I couldn't do like this because again, that
Okay.
kind of messed up. Yeah. So you
just
can
have to
do,
a nest or
yeah, you can extend your ors or an and, like I could have, let's say that this was and. I could have another one. And then I could continue that way. So,
something. Okay, cool, thanks.
yeah. Yeah. Was there another hand that was raised? I know that was, I saw, Grayling, go ahead.
Is there a use for just one and simple?
There's not for conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I'm
always
sorry, I don't
double.
know how to use oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Dola.
So I read somewhere if one of the conditions is true, for example, like line 29 and 30, if that's true, it just skips everything else. Is that still correct?
Yeah, you beat me to it. That's what I'm getting to next.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, no, you're good. Way to go. Any other questions on what we've talked about this? And then we'll do that and then we'll take a little break.
I just wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
No, all good. if, so say we wanted to try and make this as clean as possible, would
Mhm.
we be able to do everything that we did in the else if it was all true, and just put it in the if, and then just skip else if, and then just go to else?
We could, but what if a number, so let's say here we had this and, right? Because there's two things that we're trying to do. Either it's divisible by 5 or 3, or it's divisible by both, right? So we still need these three, because if I just do this and here, well, then it's not gonna work. Like if I did just and we're wanting to, if it is divisible by 3, print foo, let's say that my number is 9. Well, this is never gonna hit, because though 3 or 9 modulus 3 is 0, this 9 modulus 5 is gonna give me 4, and so it's never gonna hit because these conditions aren't true. On the vice versa, if I were to make this an or, then maybe I could do it by 3 or by 5, but I couldn't figure out how to do both, right? Because this is always gonna hit. So even if it's 9, it's gonna enter into this and do foobar, but 9 is not divisible by 5. Right, so we'll
Okay.
still need 3 different conditions. How we place them is what we're gonna talk about next, but we still would need 3. And then Daniel, I think you had a quick question.
Yeah, I was doing the get on that ride
Mhm.
one, and I used one single and it still worked, but that's not how it's supposed to work, right? That's the bitwise
Yeah.
operator and the arithmetic operators, the two ands.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So like, is there a reason it still worked, or does it matter?
I would have to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Last thing I want to bring up is Graylin, go ahead real quickly, and then I want to hop into this.
Oh, I forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, perfect. Last thing I want to talk about, my friend, is it Dola? Dala? How do I say it?
Yes, Dola.
Dola, perfect. Okay, I had it first. Dola brought up a wonderful point, and this is the whole reason why I show it this way. When we are, let's say that I had this else, right? And I'm just going to say console.log. Nothing worked. Okay. When we have a conditional statement, everybody can mute, that would rock. Okay. Also Trey, I think you're a co-host, so if you could help with that, that'd be awesome. Okay. When you've got a conditional statement, again, it's going to start at the top and it's going to keep going down. And once it finds, because this is a chain, right? Conditional chain. Once it finds one to be true, it exits your conditional chain. So let's say that this was 9. We have this exact code right here, right? In theory, both of these are true. Whatever's on line 32 and on line 26, right? Because 9 modulo 3 gives me 0. That's true. And because I currently have an or right here, this is also true, right? 9 modulus 3 is 0. But when we're dealing with conditional statements, the minute it finds one to be true, it exits and skips the rest of them. So right here, what would happen is it would enter into my conditional statement. It would check this first condition. It is true. It will do whatever is there. And then it actually skips all the way down to line 38. It totally avoids the rest of this code because it's just looking for one true thing. So if I were to do something like this, oops, and this is 15, logically, what is our issue here?
They're all true.
They're all true, right? So it's only going to hit every time we run this, it's just going to console log foo, right? And if I were to run this, it gives me foo. Well, that doesn't make sense because this also is true and this is also true. And so one thing to know is that when we're dealing with conditional statements, if I've got a unique case, in this case, this is my unique case, right? If both of these are true, then I want to make sure that that is at the top. Or else it's never going to hit. And so what I would want to do is really do this. And then say, also. Right, I first want to check my most unique part, my most unique condition. If that does not work, then it goes down. Okay, now it's checking for 3. Let's say my number is 10, right? Is 10 modulus 3 equal to 0? No, it's not. It's 1, right? So it doesn't, it skips this, goes to the next one. Is 10 modulus 3 equals 0? No, it's not. Is 10 modulus 5 0? Yes, it is. Okay, bar. And vice versa, if I go to 15, is 15 modulus 3 equal to 0? Yes, it is. Is 15 modulus 5 equal to 0? Yes. This has an and sign, so both of these had to be true. Therefore, it does foo bar. So once a conditional statement finds a true statement, it breaks the chain and skips on to the next line of code. So even if I had 100 else if statements after this if, it would just forget about it and go all the way down to the bottom. Now, this is my last thing, and then we'll take a little break. Remember I said an if can live alone. The minute I do something like this, an if here, here's my condition, cool, great. The minute it sees another if, a new chain starts. So now, if it was going to be, yeah, we'll do 15. What's going to happen is it's going to get here. Both of these are true. It's going to console log that. I've got another if statement, so a new chain starts. It's going to come in here and say, is 15 modulus 3 equal to 0? Yes, it is. So it's going to also do foo. So we got foo bar and foo. Okay. I'll pause there. Are there any other questions on conditional statements? And the last thing, not to get, we're not going to really talk about it, but you can have a condition within a condition. So if I were to say something like, if num modulus 5 equal to 0, and I come in here and I say if num equals 10, and if I run this, it should console log the number is 10, and then it'll console log bar after. Yep, the number is 10 and then bar. This is what we call a nested if statement. It means that there's an if statement within an if statement. So that is also a thing that you can do. If you have, you know, an even more, like if we were to check to see if the birth date, let's say we had a birth date and age, and we were to say, okay, if they're greater than or equal to 21, cool. And then we checked and say, well, it's today their birthday. And if it was, then we say happy birthday, that kind of thing. That's the way that works. So you can have multiple if statements. This is super common to have nested if statements. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions on what we're talking about, what we're doing? You guys have asked great questions. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this is making sense. Okay, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, this might be slightly beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but I was talking to one of my friends earlier, who is a programmer, and we were talking about the inside of the conditions, how you technically mix the and the or by using parentheses. He kind of went over truth tables with me, but
oh sure, yeah, that's super beyond.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah, super beyond what we're going over. So, but yeah, happy to kind of talk outside of that. Cool. Any other questions?
I don't know if this is the place for it, but I got kind of messed up with these conditional or these nested if statements with that flashlight. I don't know if it was a practice or if it was an actual like assignment.
Sure.
It was like the flashlight on or off thing.
Okay.
And I wanted to see how that kind of played in there because it was like it had nested ifs and then it also had like equal to like true or false, but there was no like actual values or variables set for true and false, and that was what kind of messed me up.
Sure. I'd say let's talk about that after class and or in like a dojo hall kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording, or actually stop the record. I'm gonna pause it. All right, friends, welcome. We are on part 2 of our lecture. So we've already covered conditional statements. We are not going to be able to get to concatenation and template literals. Again, I talked about this in office hour. I'm just saying this for the recording, but that is in our office hour. That's in our class sheet. You can see that. I think it's at the beginning of it. We talk about string concatenation and we talk about template literals. It's just a way to add strings together, make it look really nice. There's an easier way with template literals, but that is there. If we have time tonight, then we can talk about it. But I want to focus on for loops and T diagrams. And if we have time, we'll get to nested for loops. Okay. So can anybody tell me what a for loop is, or what is the point of a for loop? I'm not even sharing my screen. How embarrassing. Tell me the point of a for loop. What?
It's a way to make instead of typing out multiple processes, it's a way to loop the process over and over for multiple tasks.
Yeah.
Same task.
Yeah, exactly, James. It's basically a way that I can create a block of code. And let's say I have to do, I want the computer to do the same thing over and over and over again, or I have a repetitive task I needed to do. What I can do is I can just make this block of code and put it on a loop. If you guys have ever, kind of interacted with the world and you think like, oh, my life's just on a loop. I'm doing the same thing every day. Or, you see shows that say that, things are like on a loop. It's just over and over and over and over again. Same kind of a thing. It just takes code and then it repeats it over and over and over again. It's really, it's something you're going to use all the time, but it's a way that we can iterate. Also, there's a keyword of like iteration. If you've got a whole bunch of things, you can iterate through maybe an array, or you can iterate through different numbers, and you can do certain tasks, right? And so a for loop, there's some construction, and we're going to talk about it at the high level, and then we'll go into actually building it. It's got 3 main pieces. It's got a beginning, it's got an end, and it's what we call our step, or how we're going to move within this loop. So let's go ahead and build our first for loop. And what I wanted to do is I want to build a for loop to print the numbers 1 through 10. Perfect. Cool. So in the same way that our conditional statement has some keywords of if, else, and that's something that JavaScript knows, well, the same thing happens. We have a keyword of for, and then we do these parentheses. And so what happens is when JavaScript sees this for, then it automatically says, okay, I'm going to do some repetitive tasks. Well, it needs some information before we can get there. First thing is that we need a beginning. And so in this case, we're starting in numbers 1 and 10. What do you think? We want to print numbers or console log. I'll say console.log, the numbers 1 through 10. If I'm doing that, where do you think I'm going to start? Where should I start? Yeah, exactly. The number 1. Oh, give me a second. Trey, I made you, unless you left and came back. Give me just 1 second, guys. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay. If I want to do numbers 1 through 10, then I need to go ahead and probably start at number 1, right? So the way we create this beginning is I say let's, and this is us just declaring a variable. Now this next portion can be whatever you want. If you want a unicorn or cupcake or whatever, you could do that. That's fine. I usually just use unicorn or cupcake It's kind of outrageous, right? What you will typically see is just a letter. So X or I is really, really popular. So let I equal 1, right? That's where I want to begin. I want to start at 1. That's my beginning. Now, I know I've said a little bit that, hey, JavaScript will interpret semicolons. For for loops, it is imperative that you put them. You have to put semicolons within a for loop, or else it will break. JavaScript will not interpret them. Now, the second thing is, I want it to, where do I want it to end? What number did I say I wanted to get to? 10, right? So we have our beginning. Now I need to do my end. And the way we do that is we don't just put the number 10. We need to put some sort of condition. It's going to check for a Boolean in the same way that we've got these. Is it's going to check and say, okay, whatever my number is, it has some condition. And only as long as that condition is still true, it's going to continue. So the way I do this is to say I is less than or equal to 10. And we'll talk about why it's less than or equal to here in a second. And the last thing is step. What step is just basically saying is if I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going up by 1. I'm stepping from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, 3 to 4. So I'm stepping by 1, right? I can go every other one. I could do all that. For our step, I could do I plus 1, right? And so I'm just saying, okay, go ahead and add. Or the way that we typically do it is we just do I plus plus. That means I want you to step by 1. So I'm going to go through every single one of them, I plus plus. Cool. Now I've created my beginning. I've established my end and I've established my step. Now is where I do my repetitive task, right? Here's what I want you to do. In the console.log, I, right? I represents my number. And I'm just going to console.log I. So here we have our for loop. We have our beginning, our end, and our step, and our console log. Now let's walk through what it's going to do each time. And a task, or not a task, but a tool we use here at Coding Dojo is called a T diagram. Now, as you guys are beginning to do for loops, I'd really suggest a T diagram just to keep track of what you're doing. As you get older, or not older, but as you get more advanced and you have more practice with for loops, you don't need them necessarily. Like you still might use them occasionally, but it's just for at the beginning. I'd really encourage you guys to use a T diagram just to keep track and know, especially when we get into nested for loops, which we'll talk about here at the end. It's just a really easy, simple thing to use. So what happens is I'm going to create my T diagram, and you can do this on paper. You can do this however you want. I'm just going to annotate on the screen if Zoom will let me annotate. There we go. I'm just going to annotate on the screen, but you can do it however you choose. The way you do it is you just make a T, surprise, surprise, hence the name. And on the left, you're going to put your variable. So in this case, my variable is I, right? So I, and it is equal to 1. Cool. No, this is a little bit too long. 1. Perfect. So the way a for loop works is it's going to say, okay, it's starting. We have a beginning, I equals 1. It then goes there and says, okay, is my condition still true? Is I less than or equal to 10? Well, what it's saying is 1 less than or equal to 10. And that is going to be true, right? 1 is less than or equal to 10. So then it says, okay, great. I'm going to go into my loop. So wherever this bracket starts, and I'm going to do whatever those lines of code say. In this case, it's just console logging. So I'm just going to put CL for console log. I like to do console log as well, just to kind of keep track. And what am I console logging? I is 1. So it's going to console log 1. Cool. Once it gets to here, this last curly bracket, and all this code has been ran, it's going to come up to my step. And it's going to do I plus plus. In this case, that's I equals I plus 1. That's what I plus plus means, right? So it's changing the value of I. So if we're just adding 1, I is no longer 1, but now it's 2. All right, so my T diagram, I go and I change it from 1 to 2. Well, then what it does is it comes back here and says, is my condition still true? Is 2 less than or equal to 10? It is. So then it hops back in, console logs I, so we get 2. Then once it's done, comes back up here, we go to I plus plus. I is no longer 2, it's now 3. Is 3 less than or equal to 10? It is. So then it enters into my for loop and does whatever my for loop says. So it's going to console log 3. Then it's going to go up to my step. I plus plus, I becomes 4. And you can see the pattern, right? Keeps going all the way. So we're going to console log 4. As it enters in, it goes all the way to 5. And I'm just crossing them out because that's what it no longer is. If you just delete, like erase it, that also works. It's 5. Is 5 less than or equal to 10? Yep, it keeps doing that for 5, for 6, for 7, for 8, 9, and even 10, right? Because I becomes 10. Let's say that dot, 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 I is 10. It's going to say, okay, is 10 less than or equal to 10? It is. That's still true. So then therefore, it's going to console log 10. And that's why we have to have this equal than. If I just said if I is less than 10, but I wanted to go all the way through 10, it's never going to work, right? It's going to stop because 10 is not less than 10, it's equal to. So that's why we have to have that equal sign. Now, once it gets to this point, we have console logged I is 10, we've console logged it. It still comes up and says I plus plus. I becomes 11. Then it checks and says, is I less than or equal to 10? Is 11 less than or equal to 10? No, it's not, right? So the minute that happens, the minute we get a false, then it exits my for loop for good. And then it goes on to the next line and just continues my code. So let's say that I was doing, let me clear these drawings. Let's say that I did to 100, it's going to do this from 1 to 100, but once I becomes 101, it's done running. If I did this to 1,000,000 or whatever that number is, it's going to do a whole bunch of that. I'm not going to do it because my computer will be like, but it's going to do all of those numbers. And then once it gets to that portion, you can see how nice that is to not say like, if I equals 1, then console log 1. If I equals 2, console log 2. We can just have it do something repetitive over and over and over again. So if I come here and I run this, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions on what we did, how we did that? Okay, lots of ones in the chat. Go ahead, Cottrell.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so does that I have to always be I, or can you change it to another letter or something like that?
Yeah, so this could be anything. If you wanted it to be unicorn. And again, I use unicorn because
Oh, it can be a whole
it can
word?
be
Okay.
anything you want it to be. Now, typically it's I or X. You might see it as like X. But I is one of the most popular. But yeah, it could be anything you want it to
Okay,
be.
gotcha.
If you want to refer to it as num, you could do num. If that's easier for you, whatever you want it to be. It's just a variable.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Well, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so for the sake of like writing line 44, it's always beginning and then step. But then when when we go to console login, it's usually beginning, step, and then end.
Yeah, so from a writing perspective, yes, the three main things are beginning and step. But the way that it operates is at the very beginning, it does the beginning, right? And it establishes I or whatever your variable is. And then after that, you can kind of throw beginning out the window, right? Because we've already started the beginning. We're good to go. It checks to see, is this condition true? It is. And then, yes, you're right. It doesn't do the step yet. It goes in, and once it gets true for this first one, it goes in and does this code. Then once it gets to the end of my for loop, so this bracket here, then it goes up and then runs my step. And then now all I'm working with is my step and my condition, my step, then my condition, my step, then my condition. So then it steps up, I becomes 2, it checks my condition, and then it enters in. Increases, checks my condition. If it's true, enters in, and then so on and so forth, repetitively until this condition is no longer true.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Can you run the code? I'm just curious. Can you run the code without the equal sign, just the greater? I just want to see what's the output.
Any guesses?
Well, no. The just greater than, not the equal sign.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, any guesses of what's going to happen? Greater than or less than?
Less than.
Less than.
Sorry.
It won't.
Good.
It won't go to 10. It won't
Yeah,
log
what will it stop at?
9.
9, right? Stops at 9 because I plus plus is gonna, once it gets to 9, it goes to I plus plus. Let me pull this down a little bit. I plus plus. So I plus plus is gonna make it 10, and is 10 less than 10? No, 10 is 10, right? They are equal. So that's where the equal then comes from.
All cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Okay. Now let's go ahead, Justin.
Quick syntax thing. Can you, like, instead of I, will it not let you name that an actual like term like var? Like if you want to use the term variable, will that cause an error?
No, we just showed that you could, I called this unicorn just a second ago, and it works just fine. So if I wanted to call it variable, oh.
But what if you call it var? Like that's an actual term that Java recognizes.
JavaScript, that's one big thing. Let's see. Because Java and JavaScript are different. I think it's gonna give me an error, yeah, because it's a it's not gonna work because anytime it reads var, it thinks you're declaring something after, so you can't name a variable var. You can call it,
Gotcha.
The workaround that I would say is to call it something I see as num. It usually helps people too. You want to just do like number, you can do that.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. Great. So we've seen like a basic counting loop. Now let's do something a little bit more advanced. Let me comment this out. Is let's say that I only wanted to console log the even numbers. What would I do here? Anybody start me? I wanted to iterate through, let's go, let's say, so console log all even numbers 0 through 20.
You throw a modular in there?
Yeah, I would. What am I going to start with here? Yeah, but exactly, Justin, I am going to use that.
You're gonna have to start your for loop.
Yeah, exactly. So I say 4. 4. And what am I going to do? James got us started. Somebody else, what are we going to do here? Let. Yeah. And what, Graylin? Give me this portion.
Num equal 2.
Not 2. What am I starting at? What if I want to start?
Oh, 0.
0, yeah, right? Because I'm going from 0 to 20. Cool. All right, thanks, Graylin. Got the first part. Great job. Now, what am I gonna do next? Somebody else.
Num mod 2 equals 0.
Num mod 2 equals 0. Okay. So in this is saying only if I'm gonna get a remainder of 0, then that's gonna be true. And if not, it's gonna end my for loop, right? I wanna make sure I go through the number 20. This, Daniel, is the exact code that we're gonna need, just in a different part.
That's for the if statement.
Yeah. So what if I said num less than or equal to 20, right? And that allows us to make sure, oops, sorry, allows us to make sure we're going all the way through and up to 20. And there's two things I could do, right? I could do like I plus 2.
Hmm.
But that's because I know hard coded that 0 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 is going to be even, but I don't always know that. So I'm going to say I plus plus, right? Because let's say that I gave in, you know, let's just do I plus plus. Right? We want to check every single one because we don't always start at 0. It's not, life is not always that easy when we're coding. Okay.
Shouldn't it be num plus plus?
Yep. Thank you, Seth. I'm used to calling it I. We called it num in this one. Yep. Great job. Okay.
Could you do an and statement in that with the num equals or num is less than or equal to 20? Like after that?
Not
Like
that you mean,
or like a separate conditional to do the mod in that statement right there, or would it you always have to do the if statement inside the for loop?
inside the for loop, because remember, this is what exits my for loop. So if let's say we were to do something like num modulus 2 equals 0. Let's just say that we did this. This is going to give me true or false, right? So for this first one, 0, 2, that's still going to give me, I don't even know if that gives me 0 because I think it might give me a remainder of 2, right? And so once this is false, it exits my for loop. So even if it were to, let's say it did work, and then it got to like, let's say I started at 1 modulus 2 is going to give me a remainder of 2. That is not 0. So then it's already going to exit my for loop. So anytime we're doing some sort of modulus, we usually want to reserve that for within my for loop. This end part, and this is such a great question. This end part is really just, what am I wanting to check? I want to check all the numbers from 0 to 20. That's what I want to make sure. This end is, I want to make sure I'm going through all of my material that I want to check. So that's where we're going to say num is less than or equal to 20. Cool. Now is where I would say if, and then like you said, Daniel, we have num modulus 2 equals 0. Then what am I going to do? I see Ben already put it in there. We're going to say console.log num. Perfect. Do I need an else statement here?
No.
I don't, right? Because I don't care if it's, I don't need to say like not even. I just want to console log all the even. So now if I run this, I get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, all the way through 20, all of my even numbers. Cool. Okay, we're going to take it up a notch. Right now, we're setting these values. Right? I'm setting it within my for loop. But like we had talked about, we don't always want to step because we don't know maybe that this isn't a hard-coded one. Let's say that I've got let some num equal 16 and let end num equal 50. And instead of log all the even numbers of 0 to 20, log all the even numbers between some num and num. Perfect. With this information, we already have this set up. What are the little changes I need to do in order to make this work?
change num to some num and put 16.
So I don't want to hard code it, right? How do I make sure if let's say that I wanted to change some num, or let's say some num constantly changed. You're right on the right track, Raylan.
So num equals some num.
Yeah, exactly, Justin. So I can say num equals some num and call that information into my for loop. In the same way, I can do the same thing with my end, right? It's end num. And so now if I were to change this to 18 or to, 46, right? It doesn't matter what I change these to, as long as, right, some num is less than end num. So if I were to go, 51, then immediately we're going to set num to some num, which is 51. And it's going to say, is 51 less than or equal to 50? No, so it's not even going to go into my for loop, right? But given that this condition is fine, this allows me to call in information. Now, one thing I want to make very clear. This is just a variable name. This, or within my for loop, this num only lives within my for loop. Sometimes I see students get confused with the naming of this and bring in a variable up top. That's why I typically will just name this I. But when we are dealing with values, sometimes what I see is students get confused again and then do something like this. Right? And if I were to do this, it's just going to, it's still going to work in the sense of I is going to keep increasing and eventually it's going to end, but it's just going to be printing 16 every time because it's coming from here, right? The variable within my for loop that only lives within, it's called the scope, right, of my for loop. It only lives here. If I were to try to console log I outside of my for loop, it's going to say, I don't know what that is, right? Because I just lives within this block here. So if I were to do this, I don't want to do this. Let's just, oops. I'm going to change this just so you guys can really see this is kind of beyond the scope, but 46 and 50, right? But then it says console log I don't know, I is not defined. You'll learn this at a deeper level within our web fundamentals when we're talking about scoping and the difference between var. This is a big varlet difference. If I were to call this var, then it would work, should work. But I only lives and should only live within this for loop. So always use let for that as well, but it only lives within this for loop. So if you try to refer to it outside of it, then you're gonna have some issues. Okay, go ahead, Graylin.
Can you provide like an example of why we would need to do something like this in a work scenario?
Yeah. So you're gonna have to iterate through, let's say that you're gonna have like an array of stuff. And you're gonna wanna iterate through, and we're gonna do that here in just a second where we iterate through an array. And maybe you want to iterate through and check something. You wanna check the data. You wanna check to see, let's say you're taking temperature gauges. You're working for like an oil company of temperature gauges and you wanna make sure your pipelines are all good. You're going to get data, and data is going to be oftentimes given to you in an array format or an object, but same sort of thing. You can do the same iteration through, and you're going to have to check every single one in order for it to check and say, okay, does this meet some sort of condition? If it does, maybe it gets a little bit too hot. At the end of the day, maybe you want to have a report that says, hey, pipeline 3 got hot at 2:55, at 3:15, and at 4:15 today. So getting a bunch of data at a company that I worked at, we'd get data at AWS based off of IoT data, and then we'd have to iterate through genuinely. It's just all given in objects. It's called JSON object, but kind of similar to an array. And you'd have to iterate through all of the data and you'd have to check, okay, let me iterate through, let me grab that data. Iterating means I'm just gonna go one by one. So kind of going step by step by step by step, that's called iterating. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna check all of that data, and if it hits a specific mark, then I wanna ping somebody and say, hey, that's not, there's an issue here. So it's something that you're constantly going through data, is you're gonna use for loops for that all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Cool. Now, we're gonna take it up one more notch. And we're gonna say something like this. We're gonna say for let I equal 0. I is less than 5. I plus plus. And then I'm gonna say for J, and usually you'll see I and J equals 0. J is less than 3. J plus plus. Console dot J. Okay. We're gonna walk through this. And this is one where a T diagram really comes in handy. So let's go ahead and make one. Okay. So we're starting. We have our first, we're seeing our first for loop. This is what we call a nested for loop. We have our first for loop. We're declaring a variable called I, and it's equal to 0, right?
Mhm.
Cool. What we're doing, what's the first step of a for loop? Somebody want to explain what's the first step? We've declared the variable, then what does it do? Declare it here.
And then goes to the condition.
And it checks the condition. Is 0 less than 5? It is. And then it goes, enters into my for loop, right? Remember this curly bracket's my gate. It enters into. Now I see another for loop. So the process repeats, right? I see, I'm declaring a new variable of J. I'm gonna do a capital J just so it's easier to understand. That is equal to 0. J is less than 3. Is 0 less than 3? It is. We enter into this gate, right? You always go as deep as you can with the for loop. If I had a third one, then I'd keep going on. One thing to know is with a block of code that's a for loop is it runs until the condition is met. So though you see that I've got two things here that my code is doing, right? Or that my first top for loop has. I've got this portion here. That's my for loop. Then I also have this portion here. That's my console log. Like that's my two things it's doing. I have a for loop and a console log. What we have to do though, is when I have a nested for loop, I have to let this for loop run its course until it's done and we exit it. And then I get to line 63. So I have my console log. Oh, that's a bad L. There we go. So we've established that J is 0, J is less than 3. It enters into my for loop, right? What do? We console log 0. Perfect. Now it comes up here, J plus plus, J becomes 1. It checks, is 1 less than 3? It is. What do? We console log 1. J plus plus, it becomes 2. Is 2 less than 3? It is. We console log it to 2. I plus plus, J becomes 3. Now we get, is 3 less than 3? It's not, right? We exit this for loop. Then we come to line 63 and we console log I. I is currently 0. So then we're going to console log 0. We get to the end of this for loop, we go all the way up here. I plus plus, I becomes 1. Now, every time we have a for loop, and especially if we have like a nested for loop, though we've already gone through this J for loop before, once I plus plus happens and I becomes 1, we start the whole process over again. So then now we come here and we establish J equals 0. I is still 1, but J equals 0. Is 0 less than 3? It is. So then we're going to go 0. J plus plus to 1. Is 1 less than 3? It is. We go 1. Go J plus plus, sorry, to 2. Console log 2. J plus plus, J becomes 3. Is 3 less than 3? It's not. We exit my for loop. We come down to 63. Console log I, and this is why I think a T diagram is really helpful at the beginning. I is 1. We keep track of that. We go 1. Get to the end of the for loop. I goes up to 2. Comes in here, restarts my for loop. And I won't go through all of them, don't worry. Restarts my for loop. Now J is no longer 0, or is no longer 3. It becomes 0. And we start that process again. Console log 0, then 1, then 2. J becomes 3. We console log I, and just keep going and going and going until this condition has been met. Right? Then the entire for loop is done, and we go on to line 65. Are there any questions on a nested for loop? Does that make sense? Okay. How are we feeling with that? Go ahead, Justin. I see that your hand's raised.
Just back on the last one where it said sum num. If you were to accidentally console log sum num, would it only log 46 3 times, since that's the number of times that it would run through the loop? Okay.
Yep. I see there's 2 more hands raised. But it doesn't show me, it just shows me a number 2. Oh, Cottrell, go ahead.
Are you able to nest multiple for loops? So if you would you be able to put one more for loop inside the one with J?
Yep.
Is there a like maximum amount of how many for loops you can do that, or can you do
No,
as many as
there's
you want?
not. There's not. There is this idea that this is way beyond the scope, but there's this thing in development called time and space complexity. And so when you're getting into, and you're going to learn all about this at the very end of the program when you go into projects and algorithms, and you're starting to learn how to make more efficient algorithms. Nested for loops aren't always the most efficient. Sometimes they're the only thing that can work, right? And so you have to do them. They're not always the most efficient though. And so you normally don't want to have like a triple nested for loop. Usually there's a more efficient way to do something like that, or okay, we could build out the code a little bit easier to do that. But yeah, there's no really limit. You could just keep having for loops and for loops and for loops. Just not always the most efficient.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you don't have to. What I would say, and this is my biggest encouragement to you guys right now, is you can always get better at writing code. But if you focus now on trying to write the most efficient code, it's going to make it a little bit challenging. So my encouragement is, and Trey, I'd be curious your thoughts, is just get the code to work. It's called like brute forcing. Sometimes you got to use 2 or 3 for loops, right? If you get the right answer, okay, perfect. Now go to Dojo Hall and say, okay, here's what I got. It's probably not the most efficient, but it works, right? You got to learn how to think and then say, is there a way that I can make this more efficient? And then they might go, oh yeah, here's how you do that. But getting it to work first and foremost is going to be the most crucial and the most key. If you have to use 3 for
I
loops,
agree with that.
yeah. Yeah.
Write it and then go back and refactor it. And that's with
Yeah.
anything, right? Because sometimes you can take that 1,000 line of code and break it down to 500 lines of code. I think like what a major company just did that recently, Tesla. I think it was Tesla. They had like 30 something thousand lines of code and broke it all the way down. And it was like they knocked off like 70% of their code to make it more efficient. So yeah.
Yeah, I think X also did that too. So maybe it's
Okay.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah. So it could be, which is Elon basically.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So you can, and this is where we were talking about like how does ChatGPT come in? That is the best way I think that you could learn is brute force it. And this I literally do this in my day to day. I write code, I get it to work, and then I go to ChatGPT and say, can I make this more efficient? And what I always say is make this code more efficient and write details on what you did to make it more efficient. So that way, when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, I could have used this built-in method I didn't know, and here's why it's more efficient, right? So that's where, you guys have asked how to use ChatGPT. This is a great way. Get your code to work, right? Make sure you're doing that. Then if you want to use something like a ChatGPT or a Bard and say, hey, can you make this more efficient? Now just know that it doesn't always do that, right? There's trade-offs with everything, and sometimes your code doesn't work, right? But because they're not the best developers, ChatGPT and code, Bard is not, right? So, but that would be a way. But again, just try to get it to work first and foremost, and then go from there. Okay. Are there any other questions on for loops?
Hey, Will, as far as variables go, can J live within the first for loop and I live within the second for loop? Like, will it recognize them? Like, if you wanted to do I less than J is the conditional?
No,
And
so if you were
J equals 5, let's say, and like, will it recognize them if that makes sense?
So if you're going down, it should. So if you were to say something like this, right? If I were to say like, if I is, let's say greater than J in console
Okay.
log, I is the winner or something like that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Then
Yep.
going down, and this is called scope. So if you're ever interested, I'm not really going to talk about it because I think it's beyond, but it's called
Okay.
the scope, variable scope within JavaScript. Because I is higher up, it's first declared, you have access enter, but vice versa, you don't have access to J outside of this for loop of J. So if I
Got
were to
it.
say, console.log J, it's not going to know what J is because J only lives in here.
Inside that one. Okay, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it's the scope, and then it's not global, but again, if you're higher up, then you can kind of have access to it like this I, but you can't do the reverse. Christian asked, what is a built-in methods? So, something like we talked about it with array methods, but I guess we'll just talk about it here for the next 8 minutes is that way we have access to it is there are these things called array methods. Each data type has different functionalities. Again, kind of like a Pokemon, right? So with one data type, you have access to one functionality, and with numbers, I can do arithmetic, et cetera, et cetera. There are 3 main ones that I want to make you aware of, just so that way I can say in lecture, we talked about this because it is going to be on your exam. And within your arrays, you've got a couple different things you can do. And there is a great array method. Yeah, so right here. Let me get this for you. Put this in the chat for you guys. Okay. So here we've got 2 things. We have a property that we're going to care about, and we're going to talk about some methods. All this is, I'm saying methods and properties. What does this mean? It just means the functionality of that data type, right? What are some secret things? In the same way with a Pokemon is a fire type, they have secret fire things. Sorry, I played Pokemon a little bit. I don't know a ton about it. But, if you're water, you've got certain water things, or I think grass is the other one, or land or sea, or I don't know, whatever. You have certain like grass things, right? arrays have certain properties or methods or functionalities that they can do in order for them to, or that they have access to. So there's three big ones. The first one is a property called length. So let's say that I had some array. Well, what I can do is I can, if we follow this, you can kind of see that it just says array length or array.prototype.at. What that means is, what I can do is I could say sum, let's console.log sum array dot length. Now what this is going to do is this sum array is saying, okay, this is of type array, like we know that, or sorry, this is my variable name. We know it's of type array. Well, arrays have a property called dot length that gives you how many items are in your array. So if I do this, I should get 5, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items within my array. So I run this, I get the number 5. So anytime I do dot length, that will give me how many items are in my array. Now, one little secret is, and we talked about this, so if you were in office hours yesterday, you might already know the answer. This is position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 2, cool. So the delta between my length and the last position within my array for this example is what? 5 minus 4. The delta, the difference is 1, right? So a little secret and tip of what you can do is if I ever want to get the last item within my array, and this array could be any size, right? Because dot length is dynamic. It changes however large your array is. Then I can say some array of position, some array dot length minus 1. This is going to do some arithmetic. This is going to give me 5 minus 1, which is 4. So I'm basically saying some array position 4, which is my last one. So then I can console log this and it'll give me the number. I'm going to make this 500 just for number's sake. It's going to give me the number 500. So one secret is if you want the last item in an array, you do the length minus 1. Now, why, we'll kind of pause here for a second. There's 2 more things I want to show you. 2 quick ones, then, because I think they're on the exam, is dot pop and dot push. So dot pop will take the last item within your array and get rid of it. So if I were to say console.log some array, but then I said some array.pop. Now, one thing to note is because this is a method, which is a method is just a function, you actually have to do this parentheses. The only one you don't with arrays is length because it's a property. Any of these other ones that you're using, you do have to have the parenthesis. But what we can see is this gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 500. Then I pop, I get rid of that last item, and then I console log it again, and I no longer have that item. So pop gets rid of last item in array. On the opposite side, I've got something. Let's just take this. And if I want to add something to the end, then what I can do is I can say dot push, and then what number I want to add in there. So here we see that I've got 500 pushing will add whatever value I put in there to the end of my array. So we see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 500. I wanted to push the number 6. So now so first this happens, then I push, meaning I add this to the end. And then I console log it again. And then now I've got a new array with the number 6 there. So pop and push are two big ones. And then really dot length is going to be crucial. So I wanted to make sure we talked about this in office hour, but I just wanted to make sure that I showed that to you guys. Go ahead, Justin.
Is there ever an instance where you have to put something in the parentheses of the dot pop?
No, pop will, nope, you don't have to do that.
Will, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So instead of doing pop push, wouldn't it just be easier to go like say line 69 and just delete the last or add the last number?
Yeah, but let's say that I'm just gonna kind of breeze through this. Yes, you could. But what if I wanted to do this? I had let even array. And remember, I can just create an empty array, right? I'm just establishing this. Let's say I had something like this. I wanted to get all the even numbers between 1 and 10 into this even array. Well, I could say for let I equal 1. I is less than or equal to 10. I plus plus. Then, similar to what we've already done, I could say if I modulo 2 equals 0, then this is where those methods come in. I could say even array dot push I. So I want to add into that array and I want to push in that even value. So now what this will do is if I run this, I get an issue. Where's the issue? Contents remove. There's one. Trey, do you see my error?
I didn't see the error when it popped. Can you redo it? Can you rerun it again? Well, you're not console logging anything right there.
Oh yeah, duh. Duh. Thanks, Trey. It's a log day.
No worries. I didn't know if it was like farther down the
Yeah.
page or not. That's why I said
Yeah.
run it again.
Okay.
Cool.
No, good call. So yeah, I wasn't console logging, but you can see that's where this push and pop might come in, right? Is
Okay.
I can't always go into my code, and we want to make sure we create code that way if somebody wants to, let's say we're just creating a website and people could just find even numbers and they could put in one number and another number, similar to how we had at the top, right? That they could put in, number 1 and number 2 and get a array of even numbers or whatever. Then this allows me to just take those values and push them. Same way that I was explaining, if you have maybe a pipeline or you have some IoT device data, and you only want anomalies, well, we can take those and just push those into some, here's all of my anomalies for the day. And then I have some report that has that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. The last thing I want to show you, I know I'm 3 minutes over, but I want to make sure you guys prepare for the exam. I'm sorry, I just am over wanting to make sure you guys are prepared, not being like, oh my gosh, Will did not do this for me. Is let's say I've got this. Say let another array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool. Let's say I just wanted to console log every item within my array. What I could do is I could say for let I equals 0. Now, this is going to be crucial that it always starts with 0. Can anybody think of why I would want it to start with 0?
Because of the position of the array.
Exactly, James. Because remember, my array starts at 0. Now, I want to go through the entire array. what number do I have that tells me how many items are in my array? What sort of functionality do I have access to?
Length.
Yeah, exactly. So I could say if I is less than, and remember dot length is always going to give me one more than the position within the position of my last item. So though this is 5, there's 5 items, dot length is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is position 4, right? So I don't need an equal than or equal to or anything, but I could say another array dot length. And then I plus plus. So now we're starting at 0. We're saying I want to go all the way through the end of my array. And I want you to increment by 1. Now, if I just want to console.log every item, what could I do here? I want to console log every item. What would I do here? Would I just do I?
You would put another array in there?
Yeah, another array. And then what?
The square brackets.
Square bracket, yeah. And then what will I use?
I.
Way to go, Seth. Exactly. Right? Because I is going to start at 0. Is 0 less than the length of this array? Yes, it is. So we're saying, okay, I want to go into my array and I want to console log the value at that position. This is a huge thing. Students always get confused on this. They always want to think you just put I. Remember, I is just something we're using to access this. But if this was 100 and 12 and 60, 673 and 44 and 58, I does not represent that. I just represents the position that they're at. Oh. So now I could do this, right? I get 100 and then 12, 673, 44, 58. Okay. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on what I just did? This is kind of putting everything together. Any questions? Or put a 1 in the chat if this makes
I'm
sense.
confused. I got a question.
Go ahead.
When you said I equals 0, how is I representing the index? I'm confused.
Yeah, so it's just us knowing that this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So we're just starting I at 0, knowing that we can use that to say I, for this very first one, we're saying another array at position I. Well, I is 0, so it's going to get me this value. Then I is going to I plus plus. I is going to go from 0 to 1, right? And it's going to check is 1 less than the array dot length of which is 5, right? Yes, it is. So then it console logs array of 1. So then we go here. I plus plus, it becomes 2. So we're just using I to combined with our knowledge of the placement of each value, the index position of each value. So that way we can grab these values here. Does that make sense?
So that's just signifying that's where you're starting. That's just where you begin, and then outside of that, you just keep going. I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's just we know that we're matching these two up.
Okay.
We know that our index position starts at 0. So we're going to say, cool, we're just going to use this tool of I, so that way I can refer to my index position. And then it's going to eventually, as I iterates, it's going to get all the way up to 4, right? It's going to get to 4 and it's going to console log this. Then we're going to get to I plus plus. So it's going to be 5. we know our length is 5. So is I less than, our length is 5 less than 5? No, it's not, right? So then it exits my for loop. So we're just using this combined with our knowledge of index positions and how an index position starts at 0 to then manipulate that and grab positions within my array. Yes, exactly like what Seth said. You can think of I as just really being a position of index within my array. We're just using that tool.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Cool. Well, sorry, I went 10 minutes over. I just want to make sure you guys were prepared and weren't confused by anything on the exam. Just as a reminder, you'll get an email tomorrow for the belt exam. You have to have 6 out of 7 assignments due or done. And don't forget, there are going to be functions on the exam. I've not talked on them yet. So there is some available, or there are some videos there that you can have access to on the platform that do talk about that, and there is material, but just know that there will be. So if you look at it, the last 3 are like functions. Oh my gosh, I don't know what this is. This is this is my warning to you. Use this function and parameters, and then go watch a video if you need. If you want to do it this weekend, I'd encourage you to just go watch that video and then open the exam, or open the exam, try your hand at it. If you think you're, if you read it, okay, cool. Let me try my hand at it. Remember, once you open it, you have 24 hours to take it as many times as you want. Just within that 24 hours though. Screenshot the highest, or screenshot your score. It'll say like the highest score. As long as you have an 8 out of 10 or more, so an 8, a 9, or a 10 out of 10, then you passed and you crushed it. Make sure you do that screenshot. The last thing I'll say is keep that screenshot with you. Sometimes there are, and it's seldom, but maybe there's an error, and I've had it, and I had it my last stack that I was in, where a student uploaded it, and either they didn't upload it correctly or some weird thing happened, and it looked like they hadn't uploaded their exam, but they had a screenshot of it. And so then I'm able to take that and I can advocate on your behalf and say, nope, here's the screenshot, we're good. I will always advocate on your behalf. But if you say, no, I got a 10 out of 10, but you don't have any sort of, you don't have any record of that, you don't have a screenshot, you don't have anything from that, and we're not showing that, there's nothing I can do, right? So make sure that you keep that screenshot just on your desktop until you know that you're good to go. So other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful day, or a wonderful night, wonderful weekend. Somebody asked if for whatever reason you have to walk away during mid-test during the exam. Is that possible? Yeah, you've just got 24 hours to keep taking it. So you should be able to log back in. If you run into any technical issues, please email me and let me know you've run into some technical issues. You have to do this immediately. If you wait until Monday and say, oh, I tried to take it on Saturday and nothing, it wasn't working, but I don't have a screenshot or anything. Again, I can't advocate for you and help you. Daniel asked a great question. You can use, it's open universe. So you can use anything. You can't use ChatGPT. That's the only thing. You can't use AI for that. But if you want to use cheat sheets, if you want to use my lectures, if you want to use the platform, it's open. I mean, that's how the job is going to be, right? So you need to kind of, but yeah, you can open anything. Somebody asked, I'm on the East Coast when you need 6 completed. I will check before I leave tomorrow. But again, remember, if I'm not here, you can always go to a TA, and a TAs will be able to see how many you've done. So let's say you don't get 6 done until, let's say you don't get 6 done until Saturday morning, reach out to TA. As long as TAs are working, just reach out to them. They'll be able to check it and then get you a code. So cool. Any other questions? All right. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Sorry for going a little bit over. Just want to make sure you guys were prepared and taken care of. So just also know classes are not going to be 2 hours in the actual program. So if you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much, don't worry. This is just a weird anomaly thing. So, and that, I hope you guys have a great night. Take care. Have a happy weekend.